Today, we're honored to welcome Wendy Byrd and Eric Headlee to the show today. I'm very excited about this. They talk about some amazing things, and they're a great team that, when they integrate their therapies together, we find that we can really exponentially increase our overall wellness. And it's about overall well being as well, because we want to integrate the mind, the body, and the spirit. And we don't want to neglect anything because everything is interconnected at its core. And once we start to realize that and we start to integrate these things, we can take our health to a whole nother level. Now, Wendy is the founder of Arise Network. She talks about so many different therapies in terms of somatics, in terms of EMDR and trauma therapy. And it's so important to really come into integration with ourselves. So I'm very excited to have her on for that. Eric Headlee is really an expert in longevity. He talks about increasing our overall health span, right? Because the difference between lifespan and health span. We want to increase that overall health span and become more integrated and really live a life of purpose overall. And that's why he's on the show today. And I'm very happy to have them both on. How are you today?
Great.
Doing great.
Awesome. Yeah. So,
yeah, excited to be here.
100%. So I'm very excited to hear your stories and how you got into overall health and wellness. We can start with Wendy.
Sure. Yeah. Well, you know, I was always kind of interested in psychotherapy and counseling, like even as a kid. Um, so I went to, get my bachelor's degree, and in that time had some pretty challenging family experiences. I was microbiology major at the time. Thought I wanted to be a veterinarian because I really loved working with animals. But then with some of the challenges that happened with my family, my dad committed suicide while I was in school. And I think it's just a lot of influences kind of pulled me back towards psychology. So after I graduated, I started working with kids who are abused and neglected right out of school. And that just became a passion. It kind of drove me to recognize like the amount of trauma that's out there. So I got trained in EMDR and have been pretty influential in the EMDR community for a while now. But I got trained in trauma and EMDR really early in my career. And I've been doing that for close to 20 years now. And so through that experience, I kind of wanted to do a program that could go out there that's not just kind of a therapy and counseling program. So I started Arise, which is more of a coaching and wellness kind of lens, but it also teaches how trauma and adversity kind of affects the body and the brain, and not just from a psychological standpoint, but also how much we see our physical health being affected by these things. And so over the 20 years, it's kind of been interesting because when I first started, these concepts were really new, and there was kind of a lot of pushback on, how can trauma cause you to later on have, an autoimmune disease, for example. But the research has sort of caught up with what we were seeing in our clinical practice. And so now it's not so controversial to say that. So it's been an interesting ride over the 20 years. And so Eric, we've been married for 25 years now. He's watched that whole progress, my career kind of unfold in that way. So he's been on the inside of a lot of the mental health part because of, being around me. And then he has his own experience with healthcare and all of that. So kind of what brought us here, I guess.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So it sounds like you personally had some troubling experiences growing up, and you went into these deep experiences in terms of somatic therapy, and that kind of was the path to healing for you. Does that sound right?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things about being a therapist is you get exposed to all of these amazing therapies and theories, and hopefully you do your own work. And so it's kind of like as you're helping other people, you're also healing yourself at the same time. And so there's a lot of benefit from from kind of doing that kind of work every day, all day long.
Yeah, I love that. Makes sense. Like,
listeners.
because
Yeah.
I find that once you heal, like yourself and you kind of work towards other people, like you teach things and you learn so much in that process, and it can be a healing process in of itself.
Exactly, exactly. So there's a lot going on in that, and that those kinds of relationships where we're helping other people, we're also healing ourselves at the same time.
Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
yeah.
So, Eric, I would love to hear your story and how you got into longevity and everything wellness related.
Sure. So I've been in medicine for over 30 years. I'm mostly on the medical device side. I worked for a couple of different companies, but my story really starts in high school. My senior year, I blew out my ACL, MCL, upper and lower meniscus. So I had a catastrophic knee injury. I was on the surgical table for 9 hours. I was in a cast for 10 months. So a long healing process. But I was, 17 years old, so my body healed pretty well. About 15 or so years later, I developed osteoarthritis in my right knee, and that caused me to start to lose mobility. I had to stop skiing. I had to stop playing tennis. I had to stop doing sort of all the things that I really love to do. That led to sort of depression. It went down a rabbit hole of alcoholism. I'm the crybaby in the group, so if I start tearing up. So what ultimately happened is I had a seizure in Italy on our first day of vacation. Try doing that to your family and see how you feel. And I ended up in the hospital for a couple of days. I came back. I had a bunch of extensive testing. I found that the worst part of it was I had an F3 to F4 fibrosis of my liver, which is, F4 is cirrhosis, full blown. I was told I couldn't recover from that. And then I really dove into sort of longevity science because I didn't want to accept that answer. And then finally gave up the resistance of getting EMDR therapy. And I really equate the EMDR therapy to me not going back down that rabbit hole. There's a lot to do with glucose regulation in the brain and how mental health has an effect on that, and how you go into sort of almost like a death spiral if you don't address the part of your body that's in fight or flight all the time. But through that, I was able to. I did some mesenchymal stem cells in my right knee. I did an IV infusion of exosomes. I did some biohacking, retatrutide. Through that, a couple of weeks after, or a little while later, I had my 1 year annual with my liver, and I had reduced it to F0 to F1 fibrosis. So I had actually taken something that I was told would never come back down, and almost healed it. So that really opened my eyes to, the modern medical system is fantastic at trauma. Everybody that goes into medicine cares about treating people, but they are pigeonholed into, pill cut bill. They're given drugs as the solution to everything, and then they sort of have to address one single body part at a time. This really opened me up to say, you know what, I need to go really investigate what holistic medicine looks like and what addressing the core part of your body looks like. And I found in that in longevity there really is a lack of focus on mental health. There's a lot of bro science in it. There's a lot of go biohack, go stack, go stack peptides, go stack all these different things that are contributing to your biological health, but your mental health can very much get in the way of that. So I really thought, let's put those things together. And so I went out and I became a holistic health practitioner. I'm now certified in longevity. I'm certified in genomic testing, and I'm certified in nutrition. And I try to combine all of those things with the mental health part of it, to really help people get, above and beyond just what the modern medical system has to offer them.
Yeah, I love the observation because I noticed that as well. Like, we focus on these fancy biohacks, which are great, but we leave the mental health aspect out of it. And if we're talking about longevity, we want to be like fulfilled as well. We want to be on our purpose, and that's where the mental and emotional health takes place. So it sounds like that you integrated that as well.
Yeah, and then one of the things, the conversation that we had, I think, in the beginning of this was really like, we want to create a legacy, and our son, started the powerlifting team at TCU, so he's big into physical. He was an actor, so he was also an athlete, and he's now in graduate school for mental health, for therapy. And so, my position on that, I believe Wendy's probably is as well, is that not only a legacy in creating an organization that he may be able to move forward with, but I can help people long after I'm dead if he takes that forward. So.
Yeah, man. Legacy is so important. Just being able to kind of help as many people as you possibly can, and you know, leave a positive impact. That's what it's all about for sure.
For sure.
Yeah,
And you,
yeah.
yeah, you had mentioned like overcoming these liver challenges and a lot of like some things that you had growing up, and a lot of longevity science kind of helped you along that path. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Absolutely.
awesome.
And
So,
again, I go back to the mental health aspect of it as like you are. I tell everybody there's a comedian by the name of Josh Johnson. He's a young guy. He said something one time that just I found very profound, and I like to spread that message. And that is that you should look at yourself through the eyes of the people who love you. And
yeah,
that's not a direct quote, but that's basically what he says. And I think that that's a beautiful statement because there's too many people walking around like I was, thinking that I wasn't worth love and happiness.
that's powerful, man. Like, because a lot of us we don't feel fulfilled in our lives. Like, we kind of look at it as we're not enough, and as you mentioned, that's just not the case. And it can be very helpful to look at other people's beliefs in us, like people who love us, and they can kind of like hold us up in a sense, and we can believe in their belief, and we can become strong in our own sense over time. So I'm glad that you mentioned that.
Yeah, I want everybody to know that you are worthy, and we should find a way to get you help. And there's thousands, if not millions, of us walking around that have felt the same way and are on that same journey in one way or another.
100%. It's a powerful experience once you realize that, because once you recognize that, you can wake up to your full potential and really be a life for other people. So it's such an important point there. So, Wendy, you talk about some amazing therapies such as EMDR, somatic therapy, trauma therapy. Like, what is a powerful therapy in your mind to start to kind of uncover trauma and being able to kind of uncover blocks in our own life, in your own mind?
Yeah, so well, I'm trained in quite a few different kinds of modalities. I think the most powerful one from a clinical therapeutic standpoint is EMDR, and then when you can combine that with sort of somatic work, working with the body. But I think those two combinations do a really profound job of changing the way that information is stored. So, one of the things that we know that like early hard experiences, and we think of trauma, like, I think that people think of trauma as like, oh, something big had to happen to you, but it's not necessarily true. Having a challenging experience with peers on the playground can be enough to kind of have a pretty profound impact. Or, having to move when you're little and restart over. Like how there are so many experiences that actually create stress, and and when we're young, we don't really know how to overcome those kinds of things. So sometimes we get enough support from our, family, our community, our school, our church, whatever it is, that helps us kind of um, learn how to be okay with what's going on. But a lot of times when we're kids, we don't have a lot of power. We don't have the words to express ourselves. And so it kind of gets stuck in the body and in the mind. And then later on, we just create these adaptations, right? Whenever I feel shame, I just shut down, or I go, get on my email or doom scroll kind of thing. So we have all these adaptations that we start to adapt, and then we see ourselves as that's who we are, not really recognizing that our system has created those adaptations as a way to try to protect us from the pain that happened when we were especially younger, because we know that experiences that happen when we're very young has a pretty profound impact on us. So when I think about trauma, I don't think about just, oh, some big kind of experience like a car crash or a war. I think about and ask people, how did you have to adapt when you were little to try to understand how their nervous system, when it was just developing, had to start adapting and making changes to help them survive. And those are mental changes, but they're also physical changes. Because we know, one of the things we know about the nervous system, for example, is that we can get pretty good at, like, if I know this hard thing is coming, so I can prepare for it, and then my stress will go up, but it'll come back down, and I feel prepared for it. So the body does a pretty good job at that. But when it's unpredictable chronic stress, I don't know where it's going to come from, but I know it's there. I have to stay on high alert all the time. The body starts reacting to that in a whole different way. And that creates this kind of like what Eric was talking about, this feedback loop where all of these reactions start occurring. And then later on, what the research shows is that that's when we start developing health problems. So we see it mentally and maybe some of the ways that we adapt and react, right? How much emotional regulation do we have, for example? But we also see it in how the body has to react and how disease comes online later on. And so there are certain kinds of therapies that can go back and help the brain rewire information. And there's a lot of new science out there on memory reconsolidation and how to change the way information is stored. And when we do that, we stop that cycle from happening. And so we can not only prevent diseases from coming on if we stop that cycle in the body, but we can also then more easily learn new ways of relating, right? Because science also shows us that happiness comes mostly from having healthy connections with other people. That's where really the cherry on top, in my opinion, comes from. And these kinds of ways that we had to adapt when we were younger can stop us both physically and relationally from achieving what we want, being who we're meant to be, kind of thing.
Absolutely. I love. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so as she was talking about, neuroplasticity, longevity has an impact on that as well, because there you can go through, and again, not FDA approved, but you can do things like Cmax and Cellink, which actually contribute to neuroplasticity. They make your brain more plastic. And so when you're going through things like therapy, it allows people to be more open. And so there's many people that go through therapy that are very closed off. I was in the beginning. I had a really hard time. I probably couldn't have done this back then, come on here and had an emotional conversation with anybody, because I didn't like to show my emotion. But those types of things can contribute to having your outcome be better as well. So, there's a lot of back and forth in between the two.
Yeah, it's a great addition there, because essentially stacking the conditions in our favor, right? So make healing much more easier, kind of facilitating conditions to make healing a possibility in a sense.
Yes, exactly.
So I love how you mentioned how the information is stored, because as you mentioned, like, we go through these experiences when we're young and we don't know how to approach them in a sense. We just kind of like, oh, this happened, and we don't realize that these things can stay with us, and it becomes the foundation of how we operate in our life. And it's not until we start to become aware of these things that we can uncover them, these amazing therapies that you mentioned.
Yeah, that's right. And we, I think for a long time, people sort of, there's this hopelessness about it. Like, well, this thing happened to me, and so I can't change that it happened. So then I'm just stuck with what I got. But that understanding in the last, 10 years or so around neuroplasticity, about how the brain can change, how information and the way that it's stored can change. So when we go through emotional experiences that are kind of that high stress, high emotion, if they're too big for us to understand when we're little, or they're chronic, meaning they happened all the time, that's when the system gets overwhelmed, and the brain locks on to those kinds of memory systems. It does it as a way to try to protect us, right? So I kind of use the example of, if tigers lurk behind green bushes, then your brain says, remember green bushes, never forget green bushes are dangerous, and also generalize it out. So not just green bushes, but like maybe light green bushes, or, oh, that yellow bush could be green. So it generalizes out to try to protect you. The system is built to try to help you, but the thing that's actually helping you later on, 20 years later, when you're not little, when have more power and control, you have choices as an adult that you never had as a child. We don't need to react to green bushes anymore. We can go, well, I learned how to, fight off tigers, and so I don't need to be so scared. But the brain doesn't know that. We have to reteach it. So we have to change the way that those memories are stored. Therapies like EMDR do a phenomenal job of that. They unlock those memories that are very resilient to change, meaning they don't change very easily. But there's science on memory reconsolidation that's showing that if you have these certain kinds of ways of accessing the information and allowing the person to get new information on at the same time, then the brain actually changes and re-updates that information. So the old information, you're not just learning, okay, when I get scared, take deep breaths and cope with it. It changes. That old memory actually changes the way it's stored. And then learning is updated and you have a new system. So it's like a reprogramming of the way that information is stored. So now it's kind of like, well, I don't have to take deep breaths when I see green bushes. I just am not afraid of green bushes anymore. And that's a whole different paradigm shift in mental health of, oh, that's a way different kind of experience than let me teach you these coping skills and hope that we can use those when you get scared, for example.
I love that. It's a great point. It's essentially updating our processing system, our system, so we can kind of navigate life in a whole different way.
Yeah, and we didn't think that you could do that until kind of recently, like, oh, the brain doesn't do that, but it actually does.
Right.
Yeah.
And you had also mentioned how these things can be the basis for chronic disease, right? Our emotional system and our mind, they can play a huge role in chronic disease, and sometimes they are the cause, right? So it's like starting to become aware of these things and looking at health in a holistic way. It can really change our trajectory, because if we just focus on the physical, but we're not, bringing these things to the surface and healing these things, it can definitely be a huge source of stress in our life, and we may not even know it.
Yeah, I think then we get into this place of like, why do I keep failing, or why do I keep repeating this pattern? And it's kind of like, well, because the system's working, your physical system's actually working against you because of the way that it stored information early on and what it decided. This is dangerous. What does this mean about me? So I'm not safe, or I'm bad, or I'm shameful. I don't deserve love. These kinds of ways of thinking that actually sabotage us in profound ways later on in life that we oftentimes don't even recognize is kind of underneath there driving our behaviors and sabotaging us from creating what we want.
And then you look at the link between stress and glucose, or mental health and glucose. Glucose, you get stressed, mental health goes bad, glucose goes up, releases more insulin that gets released, eventually becomes inflammation and insulin resistance. That inflammation turns into what they call diabetes type 3. So that turns into heart disease and liver disease and all kinds of other things that you don't want. So you really have to sort of take a holistic approach and say, I need to regulate so that my glucose is regulated, so that my body doesn't go into this state of fight or flight, basically, so you don't end up in that position.
100%. That makes sense for sure. How we start to uncover these things, like as you mentioned, it can be kind of just the way that we live our life, something we're so used to, and it's our paradigm. Like, what can we do to become aware of these things so they don't stick with us the rest of our lives?
You want to do the middle part?
Yeah. Well, A good psychotherapist is always a great place to start because they can help you. But one of the things that I've recognized over like 20 years of working with people is that people don't actually get really good at telling their story. And so helping them tell their story and reflect back and look at what has happened to me in my life. So one of the things that we're doing with the Rise is creating a program where people can actually have a place where they can walk through that story. I think that's the very first thing that people need to do is, number one, not be afraid that it can't change, because I'm not going to look at something if I think I can't change it. Why go into something that could be hard if I believe, well, that's the past, there's nothing I can do about it, and I don't gain anything from going back there. So spreading the word that actually you can change the way this is laid down. You can change the way your brain holds on to it. And so going back there starts to make more sense. So telling our story and understanding our story starts to make more sense. And so finding ways that we can help people start to look at what happened to them through a lens of curiosity and compassion. Because when we're kids, we do the best we can with what's around us, and we don't really get a choice for what happens to us, who's around us, what we had to survive, right? And how we took what messages we took. So if we took, I'm not smart, I'm a bad kid, or I can't do anything right, all of that's kind of living back there. And we have to identify it, because if you don't understand it, you can't change it. And so that's the biggest part, I think, that people sort of go, well, why would I want to think about those things that were really hard for me? Well, you wouldn't unless you know you can change it. And knowing that you can change it changes everything, because then you sort of go, well, I can take control and responsibility. I can go back and change this and have an effect on my present day and my future outcome.
Yeah, so powerful. I mean, curiosity is key, right? Because once we actually start to take 100% responsibility for things that happen to us, that's not to say everything is our fault, right? And there's a
Right.
difference. Like, being 100% responsible in my mind, that's like saying this thing happened. Okay, now what? Right? Having full agency over your life, as opposed to like, hey, this is my fault. I mean, because I feel like sometimes we blame ourselves and we feel the shame, and that's not really serving us for the most part.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
curiosity, responsibility, compassion are kind of key ingredients of some of the things that we teach in Arise, because they are what's needed in order to go back and look at hard things and make changes in the present and in the future. Responsibility, if we don't take responsibility, then we can't change, because we'll just stay a victim to our circumstance. So acknowledging, like, yeah, this really crappy thing happened and I had to survive it, isn't about being a victim to it. It's, and then what, right? Well, I had to make these adaptations. I learned not to trust people. I learned to hide my emotions, or I learned that, I have to stay away from big crowds because I'm overwhelmed by them. And that means that I'm weak, or whatever it is. Those are adaptations that we had to figure out and to survive the situation. But if I go, well, then I can take ownership of like some of the adaptations that I had to create, and I can understand that I can change that. And it's in taking responsibility for those pieces that we get to learn how to grow. Because if you can't look at it and take ownership of it, then you're probably going to stay stuck in it.
Absolutely. That adaptation is key.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, Eric, in terms
Yep.
of longevity, what are some things that we should be aware of? Like, so what I look at is like who we are to be, we're now becoming, right? That means our habits are really leading us to our future in a sense. So it's why it's so important to take control of these things and really kind of understand the importance of our overall health right now.
For sure. I just taking a slight step back to the mental side, just real quick. I'm in my 50s. We were taught, excuse me, we were taught as kids that, growing up that you had to, you're not a man if you're showing emotion, suppress your feelings, your big tough guys don't show emotion. It's just not true. It takes a lot more bravery to show it. And so I think that if you're the first thing you have to do is address that, right? So don't be a me. Don't wait until you're 40 or 45 or 50 years old to start addressing your mental health. Do it early. I think the younger generation gets that way more than my generation did. So my kid's smart. He's been in therapy for a long time. I think his friends do the same thing. So do that first. But really, from a longevity standpoint, you have to look at things like your longevity can get really expensive really fast. But there are things that you can do that are absolutely free. The first thing is you can look at your metabolic health. Two things: blood pressure and waist circumference. So if your blood pressure is high all the time and your waist circumference is 40 inches or more, or if you're female, 37 inches or more, there's a good chance that you're in metabolic dysfunction. So getting out of metabolic dysfunction, losing some weight, first thing. The way you do that is movement, right? So there's a good saying that goes, when we stop moving, we start dying. Get up and move, even if it's just walk 30 minutes a day. It will have a major impact on your health. The second one is sleep. Figure out a way to make your room dark, cold, where you can sleep at night. Get a good, 7-8 hours of sleep every night. That's your body repairs itself. It does autophagy whenever, so it gets rid of the dead old zombie cells and replaces them with new vibrant cells whenever you sleep. So if you get bad sleep, that process doesn't take place as well. And then I would say, little things like I go out every morning barefoot and stand in the ground. When the sun comes up, I stare into not into the sun, but as that sunlight comes up, that early morning light before the sun actually hits is very beneficial to your body, and it helps you regulate your circadian rhythm. And then breathing, just box breath. So I can literally put on a pulse oximeter, and I can do box breathing, which is breathe in for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, breathe out for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, etc. And I can watch my heart rate decrease as that happens. And so, anytime you're in a stressful situation, you can take that and do that for a couple of minutes, and it brings your heart rate down and helps you get out of that. So there's a lot of free things you can do. I want to, with anybody that I've got, I would love to be able to get biomarkers. I would love to do genetic testing on them, but some people can't afford those types of tests, right? So about 50% of the population has this thing called the MTHFR gene. And I don't know if I can cuss on here, but it's called the motherfucker gene because of the way it's spelled. That gene, if you have it, we in the United States spray everything with folate or folic acid, right? So there's a saying called the whiter your bread, the quicker you're dead. That's because it's all full of folic acid. 50% of the population has this MTHFR gene. They cannot process folic acid. And what happens is the homocysteine levels in their bloodstream rise. That leads to chronic inflammation, heart disease, all kinds of stuff. A simple fix to that, I'd rather test, not guess, but if you can't afford to test, drop all the multivitamins you're taking and take a methylated multivitamin, because that puts into your body methylfolate, which your body produces naturally and can process instead of the folate that's being put into your body. If you are a young pregnant woman and you're taking folate, stop and take methylfolate instead. All these vitamins that they give you, postnatal or prenatal vitamins, almost all of them have folate in them, because there's I can't remember the thing, that there's a genetic dysfunction that takes place in babies sometimes that they introduce this for. But stop, because it's hurting your body. So at the very least, take a methylated multivitamin, get up and move, get good sleep. Those things alone will help you dramatically.
Absolutely. So it sounds like a big part of it is taking on these small habits every single day, right? Because it's about the process, right? And not perfection. And once we start to take on these habits and we really start to feel the momentum, like we start to get inspired because we start to feel better. And it starts to create this virtuous circle. That's what I see. And it's how everything's interconnected. And we start to stack the deck in our favor, right? All the conditions are about having these things work together so we can amplify our own health and wellness. So I'm really glad that you mentioned that.
Yep.
Also, you mentioned folate. Like, when we think of these vitamins and things like that, we want to get the natural forms of them, like things that we actually find in nature, things we find in real food, as opposed to synthetic form. And a lot of people don't have the awareness of that because it really does affect our health in a whole other way.
Absolutely. Absolutely. They say, eat the rainbow. The best thing you can do, and there's a lot of evidence around, eat all of your, multicolored veggies first, followed by your protein, and save the carbs till last, because then, you're fuller and you don't introduce as many carbs into your system at that point. But they also have, all of those have, anti-cancer properties and all kinds of stuff that are in those multicolored vegetables. And they're just way better for you than Cheerios.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that. Also, in terms of longevity, to my understanding, muscle is a huge part of that. Like, it's so important to actually have like healthy amount of muscle. Do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, so there is a doctor, if anybody wants to look her up, her name is Dr. Gabrielle Lyon. She's actually an expert in this field, and she does talk about, the metabolic, your biggest metabolic muscle is muscle, skeletal muscle, rather, your biggest metabolic tool to longevity is skeletal muscle. And so the things that I tell people to do is, you don't have to go to the gym. Go pick up something heavy and carry it around. Do what's called farmer's carries. It has multiple effects. So it increases muscle mass. It also puts pressure on your bones, which increases bone density. So you are in effect, doing all of these things all at one time with one exercise. Now, if you can go to the gym and get that, that's great too. But just simply picking up heavy stuff and carrying it around for a while is great. And so I have a couple of big dumbbells in my backyard, and I just pick them up and walk back and forth with them if I'm not on a gym day.
I love that. What is your take on protein? Like, 'cause I'm sure that plays a role as well in terms of muscle mass and longevity.
Absolutely. So, and the older you get, obviously, the more atrophy you get if you don't move around. So,
Yeah.
protein, the growing science on it right now is 30 grams for breakfast, 30 grams of protein for lunch, and 30 grams of protein for dinner at minimum. And that protein, it's not only filling, but it actually it contributes to, first and foremost, stopping sarcopenia, so stopping muscle loss. But it also contributes, if you're working out, it contributes to muscle gain. So I think it's vitally important.
I'm glad you mentioned that because for some reason, a lot of people in the longevity space, they want to restrict protein, and I don't really understand.
Yeah, I don't either. And again, the expert in this is Dr. Gabrielle Lyons, and she will
Yeah.
tell you 30 to 60 grams of protein for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
I mean, of course, fasting is super important, so maybe that's why. But we really want to have these things in perspective and keep things in balance. Like, it's so critical to our overall health and wellness for sure.
Yeah, and fasting is a great thing. Do it correctly. And there's so I did intermittent fasting for a long time, and again, whenever I came out of the seizure and came back to the U.S., I was probably 250 pounds. I'm about 170 now, and now I have to eat. I have to have my protein every morning. I can't just wait and have one meal a day now, because my body's gotten to the point where my metabolism is moving so fast that I can't. I have to keep eating to put weight on.
Yeah. I mean, is there different types of protein now we should be focused on? Like, is there, does it matter, like, in terms of amino acids? Like, what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I would, like you said, I would stick to natural protein. Going to powder and some wheys and things of that nature. Obviously, some shakes are really good for you, and I do a lot of shakes because it's hard. It's hard to put a lot of protein in just eating, eggs and steak and things of that nature. But it's important to get as much of it as you can from natural sources.
Yeah. And you mentioned bone loading as well, because as we get older, we just stop doing these things. Like, we move when we're younger, but then we just stay sedentary, right?
Yes.
And it's like, is literally creating our habits. And going back to the mind for a moment, it's like, what are our beliefs? Like, do we believe in possibility? Do we believe that if we get older, it's just how things are? Or do we actually believe that things can actually be great and we can age gracefully in a sense? And if we have that mind part down, we can go back to the physical aspects, and then we actually start to take action on these things. We start to become more mobile. We start to work out. We do all these things. So that's a great synergy in terms of that as well.
Well, just real quick, we talk about lifespan and health span, right? So in terms of health span, the average American spends 16 and a half years of their life, of their last 16 and a half years in some state of chronic disease or pain. The idea of bone loading and building muscle mass and longevity, to me, I don't care if we live 140 years. I just don't want my last 2 decades to be in terrible shape. So doing all the things that we've been talking about compresses that. So, Father Time has never lost and probably won't anytime in the near future. But we can make sure that, at least we compress that down to 4 or 5 years where we're all going to get into an age-related state of decline. But we want to shorten the amount of time that we spend in that as much as humanly possible. And doing things like get up and move. A sedentary lifestyle leads to longer and long. You want to make that 20 or 30 years of terrible existence. Lay on your couch and watch TV all day.
Yeah. There's a difference between health span and lifespan, as you mentioned, because a lot of us, we're not living longer, we're dying longer. And essentially what we're doing is we're prolonging its disease state. Like you say, we're in the modern world, we live longer, right? But I mean, we're in this chronic disease state, as you mentioned, and it doesn't have to be like that. And we can start to take control of our health and wellness. And the reality is, it's like disease doesn't just happen in a sense. We're creating it through our lifestyle, right? And it's also kind of like following the principles of nature and just kind of going from there in a sense. It's about mastering the basics. Because you mentioned there's so many different fancy things we get into longevity in terms of stem cells, like exosomes, we can get into that. But if we're not mastering the basics and foundations, all those things, they don't even really have much an effect. And they all work together in a sense.
Yeah, so I can tell you that I had stem cells in my knee because of the osteoarthritis. And without that, my movement was very restricted. So that was very necessary for me to be able to get up and move a lot more. So that there are, whenever I talk to a client, I want to address, we need to get you moving. That's one of the very first things we need to do. Because again, like I said, the saying is, you stop moving, you start dying. So we want to get you moving because that gets you out of that sedentary lifestyle. And that's what really helped me get to moving. And it could be that, something else is bothering them that we can fix in another way. That's just what helped me.
Yeah. And there's a difference between movement and exercise, right? I mean, exercise is great. We should do that. But if we're sedentary the rest of the day, that's not going to do a whole lot of benefit. We need both. We need movement piece and the exercise as well.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think going to kind of what you talked about earlier, how do our beliefs contribute to that? And so many people have the belief that you can't have a healthy, active life once you get older. And it's just the way it is. Well, I'm 55, so I can't do that anymore. Or of course my body's feeling this way. And kind of just like we sort of go, no, your brain can change things. Well, that's just a belief that you have. It doesn't mean that it's true. There are plenty of examples out there of people who are, 85 plus years old and out there, trekking mountains and things like that. So it's possible. It's just all about what you believe you can do. And if you don't believe that you can do it and you don't believe you can change it, then you're not going to.
And if you don't believe you can do it, go watch a Rolling Stones concert and watch Mick Jagger at 80 years old, what he does on stage.
I mean, that's a good point. I mean, it's we have these beliefs, but we don't even have the capacity to look outside. There are people who are doing it. How's that possible, right? It's a lot of times we don't want to look at that because we're not willing to kind of overcome ourselves in a sense. And when we start to overcome our own beliefs and our shadow or whatever you want to call it, we just kind of open up a world of possibilities, and that's where our life takes place. And as we start to kind of focus on purpose as well.
Yeah, I think that when you start to recognize that you actually do have a lot of power over all of these things, then naturally that sense of purpose starts to return. I think it's built in part of our who we are to sort of go, I'm here, I'm connected to this world, to these people that I live on this planet with, and so what do I want to do? How do I want to contribute? How do I want to be a part of this global community? And that brings a lot of I think just the best aspects of being a human being right now on the
Yeah.
planet. Yeah, of like,
Yeah, just kind of start to connect to our own joy, right? Because when we
yeah,
feel better, we do better, and that's when we start to focus on growth and service and all these higher level things, as opposed to just doing the day to day, which is most people do, unfortunately. And once we start to like up level our thoughts, our emotions, and how we feel, that's really the foundation of how we actually lead our lives in a sense.
yeah, and science kind of shows us that we have everyone on the planet has a sort of built-in part of our brain that connects with spirituality, that asks the question, what are we here for? Who are we here for? And that we sort of seek that out. But yeah, when we're in survival mode, it starts to become not even an aspect of what we think and feel, because we're just trying to survive. When we can get past survival, then we get to go asking those kinds of questions. How do I want to contribute? What's important for me to give back to others?
Yeah, it's an important point. It's like it's inherent in us, right? It's like really who we are. We just have to connect to it, and it's not that it's gone. It's just it's a lot covered up by a lot of things, a lot of distractions. And if we start to get to what is real, that's where like motivation takes place. Like that's when we start getting inspired by possibility, and we just kind of go for another level, and we kind of reach a whole nother paradigm, and we start to live a life of freedom, and that's where the joy is. That's what I find.
Yeah, I'm with you.
Yep,
Yeah.
agreed.
I mean, going back to longevity, I mean, like, it's yeah, we can do these things to up level our health, but like, what is your purpose? Like, do you want to be doing these things, right? Like, what wakes you up every day and keeps you inspired, right? And that's what it's all about. And going back, you said this, there's a science piece. Like, there's so much to that because it's all interconnected. Like, these things like are creating chemistry in our bodies, right? Our
Right.
thoughts, our emotions, and it really starts to shape the physical structure. And it's such cool information just to know, and that kind of be an inspiration as well.
Yeah, and when he was talking, the thought ran through my head that, of course, if you don't address the traumas of your past and you don't feel worthy, of course you're going to lay on the couch and watch TV. Of course you're going to think that why should I get up and work out? I don't deserve to be healthy. So you got to address that first, and
Yeah,
and I think that everything else can fall into place.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
think.
if we live in this low energy state, as we've been talking about, we kind of live in this vicious cycle, right? And this low energy is going to kind of create these more activities that we engage in that are more low energy and these habits. But we focus on the foundation and we go to the virtuous circle, right? That's when we start to be of service and we focus on these positive habits and we just kind of like go from there, and it creates this kind of spark effect. You start to become a model in a life for other people around you as well. That's what it's inspiring, because I realize your decisions don't just affect you, they affect everyone around you. And understanding that, you know wanting people to win, right, creating this internal spark, and as you create this internal spark, it gives permission to other people the same as well, and you create this this positive energy around you.
Yeah, I mean, how much influence we have on the people in our community, it's a huge thing to sort of be a model for that, but also when you can bring your authentic self, because you've done those kinds of things and you feel good physically and you're inspired by life, then people are going to be inspired with you. That's just a part of how we connect as humans. I see something that feels good, so I want to be a part of that. Right? It's how we come together, create bigger things.
Yeah, 100%. All right,
Well,
Wendy, Eric, this has
one more
been
thing.
awesome. Oh, you got another point?
One more thing. Yeah, so I
Yeah.
was just going to say that, to anybody watching, if you're just getting into this, we're in the first part of the year, right? So we're in the I'm going to get up and go to work out every day. That's my New Year's resolution. I'm going to work out 7 days a week, 5 hours a day. Don't do that. That's why people fail. Take it a bite at a time. Right. So if you're going to get into longevity or anything of that nature, you're going to start doing these activities. Get one habit at a time. take it slow. Don't try to do everything all at once because you're just going to overwhelm yourself. Take it slow, do it methodically, and eventually you'll get to a point where you're doing all of it. Just don't try to do all of it at one time.
Yeah, I love how you mentioned that. It's about the process, not about perfection. And no matter what, there's always another way. Like, just keep going. Like, because failure is going to happen, but can we be resilient and stay on course? So thank you for mentioning that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me.
Yeah, so this has been awesome. I really appreciate you coming on the show today and sharing all your insights with us. You have amazing stories, and you create great synergy together. It's very important to incorporate mind, body, and spirit. And the mind is so important in terms of somatic therapy, EMDR, all these things that are just so powerful. And when we start to become aware of these things and wake up to who we really are, that can inspire action in terms of our health, longevity. And this doesn't just go for health, it goes for everything, like health, wealth, relationships, just building your character to live on purpose. And that's what it's all about in my mind. So I appreciate you, both of you, for coming on and sharing your insights with us. It's been really awesome.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us.
Anthony, thank you very much.
So if we want to connect with you and all your work, where can we find you?
You can find us at thearisemethods.com.
All right. That's for both?
Yep, you'll find us both there.
You can find both of us there, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
All righty. Thank you.
Thank you.